Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining our conference call to talk about what's coming up for Family League this year. I'm Amy Bernstein, Director of External Relations here at Family League. Our CEO, Jonathan Rondo, and our COO, Damon Millard, will share some brief remarks, and then we'll open up the call to your questions. So now, let's get started. I'm going to turn things over to Jonathan Rondo. Jonathan, take it away.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining the call. As Amy said, in conjunction with releasing our annual report, we wanted to talk to you about what's coming ahead for Family League. As we all know, a new president is being sworn in today, and I think we all can agree that now more than ever we should work together to make changes we want to see right here in Baltimore. I wanted to focus on the few ways that here at Family League we're doing that in partnership with many of you, with a particular focus on building equity, opportunity, and access to resources that many families in Baltimore still don't have the opportunity for. With the continued generous support of Mayor Pugh and the City Council, as well as the Governor's Office for Children and nearly 30 other federal, state, local, and private funders, this year we are granting roughly $17 million to local organizations, helping them build strong families and empower Baltimore's youth. This includes the funding to many small grassroots organizations that oftentimes don't have access to public funds, as well as ongoing training and technical assistance from us and our many partners to build their programs. We continue to braid these funds together, bringing more investments to bear and funding priorities like community schools, home visiting, and others. We are also ramping up our commitment to juvenile justice reform. For example, we're deeply engaged in helping the Youth Justice and Equity Council to minimize, where possible, and eliminate structural barriers resulting in the criminalization and disproportionate detainment of youth of color. As people know, education is a big part of our work. We're working with city schools and Dr. Sandalisis and her vision, as well as the mayor's office, to implement the formal community schools policy that was passed this fall that will strengthen community schools here in Baltimore, ensuring that these schools are truly community hubs that sets up children and families for success. One of the things that I'm particularly excited about this year is our continued commitment to data, but particularly in developing a powerful new software tool that will improve data collection across all of our funded partners and across the city, from schools to OST programs to home visiting. This will allow sites to capture accurate real-time data in a much easier system than the system we've been using for the last 12 years. It will help programs at the program level as well as agencies make better decisions about what's working and provide resources where it's most needed. We will be providing a lot more information about these new data systems this spring, so please stay tuned. And finally, we are looking forward to working with Mayor Pugh and the City Council to move forward an agenda so all youth and families can thrive. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Damon Millard, to talk about our policy priorities.
Thanks, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everyone. One of the key things that Family League is focused on for this coming year as a part of the state legislative session has been basically utilizing an equity lens as a part of our approach. We've been focused on developing a clear understanding and a description of the respective problems impacting children and families in Baltimore, and supporting policy change objectives that include the collaborative support with so many of our partners, including the Baltimore Partnership to End Childhood Hunger, the Maryland Coalition for Community Schools, the School Climate Collaborative, the Coalition on Children of Incarcerated Parents, the Maryland Alliance for the Poor, the Working Matters Coalition, as well as the Juvenile Justice and Equity Council. We want to thank our board's Public Policy Committee, as well as our internal policy and legislative work group. Getting into kind of our policy priorities for 2017, last year Family League was a part of a new and emerging coalition that successfully championed the adoption of HB 1139, which basically required the local school systems to support and flex federal Title I dollars to be used for community school coordination expenses. This year, we're equally as committed to making sure that we're educating our respective legislators, as well as our coalition members who've informed the House Ways and Means Committee in terms of the community school strategy. We're looking forward to this effort being a part of the current Commission's efforts in viewing K through 12 funding in the next iteration of the Bridge to Excellence Education Funding Formula, also known as Thornton. Also as a part of that, the Community Eligibility Provision, which was also passed as a part of the Hunger-Free Schools Act of 2015, had a tremendous effect in result in terms of Baltimore City school children in access to free breakfast as well as lunch, regardless of income. The benefits have been significant from the school year 2015 to 2016, in which district-wide we saw dramatic increases in terms of school breakfast as well as lunch consumption. School breakfast average daily participation had increased by 12% in comparison between school year 14 and 15 without the provision in place. This year, that provision sunsets, and obviously we're working closely with our partners to make sure that that part of the law is actually reauthorized. We also committed to promoting greater awareness in terms of effects of parental incarceration on children. The Juvenile Justice Policy Institute basically reported that 1/3 of Maryland residents in the state prison are from Baltimore City. As a part of the Casey Foundation's Shared Sentences report and study showed strong evidence of unintended consequences of mass incarceration, including costs that are borne by children, families, and entire communities, as well as damaging and rippling effects of the respective systems in terms of education and health care. We've seen that result in terms of less than 65% of them reading at grade level, or 3 to 7% in terms of annual high school dropouts. With the support of the Governor's Office of Children, Family League hosted a 2-day convening focused in terms of removing some of these barriers and obstacles for children, youth, and families. And we're committed as a part of the Coalition for Children of Incarcerated Parents to promoting more supports and networks for this respective population. Unaccompanied and homeless youth is another key area for the Governor's Office of Children, and our role as a local management board to create networks of support for that respective community. Given the unique needs and the challenges of this respective community, the need for greater access to rapid rehousing, as well as supports in terms of transportation, have been identified as key and major issues. As a part of juvenile justice reform, the elimination of shackling and strip searches has been a major issue in terms of concern during the last legislative session. During that session, a task force was created to study the restraints, searches, and needs of children in the juvenile justice system. With that effort, a report was provided towards the end of the year in which Family League, working with in conjunction with our partners, will be supporting those recommendations, which will call for more data in basically eliminating a good number of the respective impacts in terms of trauma on these respective children and youth who are part of the juvenile justice system. The Paid and Sick Leave Act was an issue in terms of support that the Family League has weighed in on in previous years. And, of course, we're working with our partners for this year, it's the 5th year in a row, in terms of supporting that legislation to promote greater economic prosperity for families in the city of Baltimore and the state of Maryland. And lastly, school discipline and restorative practices. According to the Dignity in Schools campaign, it essentially states that the disproportionate high concentration of students of color are instructed by less experienced teachers, have less access to opportunities like advanced placement courses, and receive more expulsions as well as suspensions. These studies have also shown that students who have attended segregated schools have made lower progress in terms of areas of reading. As Family League facilitates the School Climate Collaborative, we do support the principles of lifting up positive school climate and our approach to support trauma-responsive education, restorative and healing practices, and engaging in classroom communities, as well as understanding and reducing implicit bias. Racial bias, school discipline contributes to what's known as the school-to-prison pipeline, which refer to school policies that push students, especially students of color, into the criminal justice system. Students who face even one suspension in the school year are far more likely to drop out and to come into contact with the criminal justice system. These are our key areas in terms of our focus priorities for the state legislative session, and we look forward to our partners in informing our respective stakeholders in terms of the issues that move the vision of Family League and making sure that every child grows up in a family that thrives a reality.
Is there anyone who would like to jump in first with a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. My name is Tom Dean. I'm with the Baltimore Youth Alliance Incorporated. I'd just like to get a little bit more information on the issue of discipline in schools. I don't have anything specifically that I'm looking for. I just want to get a little bit more information on what the Family League is really trying to do with school discipline.
So, in collaboration, so for the last several years, Family League has been facilitating the Baltimore Climate Collaborative that's been working in partnership with city schools and other partners to really look around how we increase restorative practices that are happening in schools. We'd be happy to if you can send your contact information to Amy, we can have our staff person who oversees the collaborative get in touch with you to answer more specific questions around sort of the collaborative and sort of how you can get involved.
And I can make this even easier because if you send a question to info@familyleague.org, anyone can do that, and we can easily gather questions there and respond to people if you just give us your contact information that way. And that's easy to remember as well, info@familyleague.org. We don't have any typed questions yet that I can see. Is there another phone question? Or, Damon, were you about to chime in there?
I was just waiting for the next question.
Oh, okay. So actually, I do see a question. What will Family League be doing in regards to advocacy and funding on workforce development efforts with older youth from high school to 24?
So one of the key things is a part of our respective partnerships, mainly with the Maryland Alliance for the Poor. There is a keen interest in terms of creating greater access to opportunities for youth in terms of workforce development. One of the major issues that I think that was a part of the package last year surrounding supporting Baltimore was increasing a number of additional slots, especially in terms of career and technology employment opportunities, as well as considered to be P-Tech slots as well, which is pathways in technology, as well as college and higher education. And so obviously, with a number of our partners, we're looking at advocating and providing support for increasing as many opportunities as possible for young people.
So the other piece that I wanted to add was that we've been working with the Governor's Office and the Governor's Office for Children around, with two other jurisdictions, around a P3 grant, which would provide workforce development potentially provide workforce development opportunities for older youth, particularly opportunity youth, in that 18 to 24 space, and we have every indication at this time, even with the new administration, to be hopeful about that.
Let me go take a different question on a somewhat different topic. Is the new data system that Jonathan mentioned, is that the Flux.io portal that was used for the Summer Funding Collaborative last year?
So the Flux system is the company that we use for Funding Track, which is the system, our grants management system. So that's the way that prospective organizations interested in receiving funding for Family League apply, as well as the way once grants are awarded, they're awarded through that system. So the system that I'm talking about would replace the Social Solutions Efforts to Outcomes system that we've been using for the last 12 years to track outcomes of the particular investments that Family League is making on behalf of our funders. And so the new system for home visiting that would be called Maxwell, and for all other investments that would be called Charm, would be rolling out this summer. I know that this fall, this past summer and fall, there was a host of focus groups with different organizations that we already fund to get feedback about the existing system, what they'd like to see in the new system, to learn how we can best develop that, and then more information about the new data system will be coming out, like I said, in mid to late spring, with training dates scheduled for the summer. Like Social Solutions to Efforts and Outcomes, there would be no cost for our funded partners to utilize this data system. It would be a requirement of funding, but again, our hope is that we are designing it in a way that would be incredibly useful to our funded partners, not just to be able to report out their outcomes tied to their grants that Family League is providing, but that would be helpful in their work beyond their work with Family League.
Thank you. Let me remind everyone that we've muted the calls again to avoid all that extraneous noise, and if you do have questions, feel free to now put them into the chat box on the right side of your screen. Another question is, what type of training is being offered for school day teachers with respect to restorative discipline?
So currently, the School Climate Collaborative with our grant from OSI have been working with city schools to develop restorative practice training. I do know that City Schools has been implementing that training, and there will be some additional training that will be happening in conjunction with that work. The specifics have not yet been worked out, but we'd be happy to share that. Since this has been sort of the second or third question, I think this could be a future call where we can provide greater detail about that work and have a couple of the collaborative members participate on that call as well.
I'm not seeing any other questions coming in at this time. I think we're just going to give people another generous handful of seconds to think about what they might want to submit. Let me remind everyone that we will, in fact, share the call transcript as well as the PowerPoint that you viewed today, as well as our annual report, and we will discuss what other relevant materials to include, and we'll make sure that we can get that out to everybody who's on the call. I think we can do that. Or we will at least post that online to make sure everybody can access that. Oh, we do? Okay. Apparently we have some questions that have come in on email. And hold on, I'm going to share those. So one is, will there be any changes to the summer collaborative process this year?
So the Summer Funding Collaborative RFP will be released shortly. I think a lot of the similarities to how there will be increased enhancements to that process, but want to be clear to the some enhancements to the process, but fundamentally the process will be similar to the way it was in past years.
And then another question, and I'm going to paraphrase a bit because it was a bit long, but the question is really asking how and to what extent, in what ways does Family League work from the bottom up, and that's the questioner's term, with the community, where input from the community is what really informs community education. I think it's having to do with input of community and how education is shaped in Baltimore.
So I can speak to how we get input in the work that Family League does. I don't know that I can speak to education broadly, but what I can say is that we constantly seek the input of organizations that we fund and that we have partnerships with, and their relationships with community to seek input that way. We also, through our work with the Governor's Office for Children, have to do ongoing community needs assessments. And knowing that in Baltimore, there's been a number of organizations that have done a lot of community listening sessions, whether that was the Fund for Educational Excellence, the work that the Opportunity Youth Collaborative have done. We've utilized those feedback and those reports to help inform our work. And we are committed to continuing to find other innovative ways to be able to get feedback from community more broadly around that. With our limited resources, that can sometimes be challenging, which is why we work so closely with partners to be able to do that. But definitely encourage any partner that wants to reach out to provide feedback, comments, to do that. We're always open to that.
We have one more follow-up question about the Summer Funding Collaborative. The question is whether there's going to be an increased investment this summer in those programs.
I'm not, at this time, I'm not sure what that dollar amount, what the dollar amount of the full collaborative is. I do know that there are potentially one or two additional members that may be joining that can change that amount, and so I don't want to speak out of turn of the official release of the RFP.
Okay. Tiffany, do you have any more email questions that have come in? I imagine you'll send them to me if you do. Otherwise, I'm not seeing any other new questions. Why don't we take about a 30-second pause and just see if anyone else has something that they would like to ask about? And if so, really the fastest way to do that is type that right into the chat box. But now we have another email question. And again, about the School Climate Collaborative, which you talked about a moment ago. Is there a long-term plan for the School Climate Collaborative? That's the question.
So the School Climate Collaborative has been formed over the last year and has developed their strategic plan, and so that plan is to begin to implement that through increasing sort of restorative practices that are happening in schools, through collaboration with city schools around training and support around that. I think over the next 2 to 3 years, that collaborative will be assessing sort of the outcomes of that, as well as working with Dr. Sandalisis and her vision of sort of the supports around a whole child for city schools. And so that's the immediate piece. Just some historical context: the Baltimore Climate Collaborative is the alignment of what was the Attendance Collaborative, as well as a group of foundations that were talking about sort of climate and mental health related issues, and that were brought together to do that. And so the aligning of resources as well as thought leadership of community partners and foundations has sort of led us to where we are today.
All right, we're getting some occasional comments coming in, but what we're going to do is really try and stick to things that are kind of in the form of questions. We did have a couple questions submitted in advance of the call, and one of those has to do with how whether there are going to be funding opportunities for community-based organizations that aren't necessarily part of the community school strategy, including OST programs.
So for the last 2 years, Family League, with support of the mayor and city council, has funded both out-of-school time programs that are not connected to community schools. As long as that funding stays intact, we anticipate that each spring we will be releasing an RFP to competitively put that pot of resources out to bid. And then using external review panel to score those and then fund those. So as long as the availability of resources for that investment continues, we don't see any reason not to continue it.
Another question that was submitted earlier is, what's happening with free breakfast and lunch in schools? Isn't the regulation for that expiring this year?
So as Damon said in the policy update, in the original legislation that was passed, it is set to sunset at the end of this fiscal year. And so we are working with the Baltimore City legislative delegation, as well as other city and state partners around, to ensure that the success around access to breakfast and lunch that we've seen that increase, that continues. And so we are hopeful that sunset will be reauthorized.
Okay, well, most of the other questions that had been submitted, I think you've covered pretty well, and I'm not seeing any new ones coming in. So, Jonathan and Damon, just any final thoughts that you want to share with the group before we end the call?
Sure. The one thing I just wanted to let you know that there seems to be a lot of interest in the Climate Collaborative, and so we will make sure that we get more information about that. But I just want to let people know that there is a Climate Collaborative meeting on Tuesday, January 24th from 4 to 6:30 p.m., and it's an open meeting here at Family League, and all are welcome. So you're more than welcome to attend. And again, if you send your information to info@familyleague.org and you want to be added to that specific listserv, we'll be sure to add that. And again, if people have, I apologize that I wasn't maybe able to answer in the level of detail people might have wanted on some of the Climate Collaborative questions. Again, if you send in those questions or send in additional your contact information, we'd be happy to have you meet with a staff person or connect you with Climate Collaborative members to get you more information. So I really appreciate everyone's time on today's call.
We did actually. Let's just take. I think we've got just two more, and then we'll be all set. Because these are very good questions to share with everybody. How can you apply to be an external grant reviewer for a Family League grant? And how can we help more people understand, how to access that process?
So that's a great question. We are always looking for external reviewers, particularly youth as well as community members. There's a very short application on Family League website. If you go to familyleague.org, if you click on careers, probably not the best place at the moment, but that's where it's located. There's a quick one-page application that you submit around it, and then a staff person from our funded partnership group will get back to you. Essentially, as long as you're a Baltimore City resident or a youth is a Baltimore City resident, and you're willing to make the commitment of time to review that, we accept every reviewer. There's a conflict of interest in a short training that gets provided for that. But we're, again, always looking for that. So I know that there has been some social media posts about our recruitment for that. I know there will be more in the coming weeks. So please share that information.
Jonathan, can you repeat the date for the date and the time for the climate meeting? And we can include that in our follow-up as well.
Yep, it's Tuesday, January 24th, so next Tuesday here at Family League from 4 to 6:30.
And then our last question, because we promised that this would be a 30-minute call. For the past 2 years, Family League has released RFPs for additional OST programs. Will there ever be an opportunity or an RFP for existing funded providers to get additional funds to serve more students?
And so, with the availability of resources, that would be our vision to bring the capacity of OST to scale. We know in the city, when you count what Family League funds, the number of kids that are participating in programs that rec centers are providing or OST programs that other foundations are funding, we know that only about 25% of Baltimore City's kids are participating in out of school. We know nationally through research from the National After School Association that number needs to be closer to 40% to reach a penetration of kids that would actually want to participate. So we know that there is a gap in that, and our goal at Family League is as we continue to do our work, is to hopefully lessen that gap and to bring programs like out of school time as well as community schools to scale, meaning that there's more access to those seats. So those are things that we continue to work on. We have increased our capacity and our ability within our own fundraising team. But as many of you know, doing this work every day, that takes time before we see outcomes of that. But our goal would be not only to increase the number of out-of-school time programs, but to be able to increase the breadth and depth that are happening in existing programs. Unfortunately, I can't say when and if we will have those resources available.
Thank you. I want to encourage everyone to submit additional follow-up questions to info@familyleague.org. We will make every effort to get responses out to people in a timely manner. We will share the information that we talked about. And this concludes our call. We really appreciate your joining us today. We hope to do this again in the future on any number of topics. We encourage you to follow Family League on Facebook and Twitter, and we wish everyone a great day. And goodbye, and thank you all very much.